This is the legend of the lone Viking at Stamford Bridge, a warrior whose defiance against an army would echo across centuries. The year was 1066 and England was under attack. The Norwegian king, Harald Hardrada, and his Viking forces had stormed into the country, wreaking havoc. They were doing what Vikings do best: attacking, pillaging, looting. Classic Viking stuff. They thought that the English were far away, but they secretly managed to march 190 miles in just 4 days. The Vikings were chilling by the river, so when the English showed up, the Vikings were caught completely off guard. The Vikings were in a terrible situation as they were spread thin across the river, relaxing. They weren't anywhere ready for a fight. The survival of the Vikings depended on one thing: time. There was just a single obstacle separating the unprepared Vikings and the English army. Luckily for the Vikings, the obstacle was a small bridge with a single Viking berserker on it. As the English forces approached, they must have thought that victory was certain. After all, how could one man stop an entire army? But this berserker didn't just stop, he made them fear him. Armed with a massive Dane axe, he stood firm, cutting down soldier after soldier with a brutal efficiency that made the bridge run red with blood. According to some accounts, he killed 40 men before the English even figured out what to do. 40. Imagine the chaos and the disbelief. One man holding off the entire English army on his own. The English weren't fools. They quickly realized brute force wasn't working. This berserker wasn't just a man, he was a force of nature. A nightmare made flesh. Every soldier who stepped onto the bridge did so knowing that they would not step off again. And so, the English did what all desperate armies do. They cheated. A single English soldier managed to sneak behind the Viking by going underneath the bridge in a barrel. In a move as cunning as it was cowardly, the soldier thrust a spear upward, striking the warrior from below. This attack fatally wounded the berserker and brought his rampage to an end. The berserker's death wasn't a tragedy. It was a testament to unbreakable resolve. His stand wasn't in vain. The time he bought allowed his comrades to regroup on the far side of the river, readying for battle. And here's the kicker: we know this story is true because the English themselves told it. They might have been his enemies, but they couldn't deny his sheer audacity, his strength, and his courage. When even your foes can't help but sing your praises, you know you've become a legend. The lone Viking at Stamford Bridge didn't just fight for his survival, he fought for glory, for his comrades, and for the unshakable spirit of his people. His last stand wasn't just a moment in history, it was a reminder that even when the odds are impossible, one person's courage can have a crazy impact. Welcome to the Battle of Saragarhi, where real history outshines anything Hollywood could ever dream up. During this battle, 21 Sikh soldiers of the British Indian Army went up against 10,000 Afghan tribesmen. Yep, you heard that right, 21 versus 10,000. It's 1897, and the British are chilling. By chilling, I mean aggressively colonizing the northwest frontier of India. Saragarhi was a tiny communication post built between a set of fortresses which the English built, Fort Lockhart and Fort Gulistan. Its only job? It served as a communication outpost to signal between the two forts using heliographs. Basically, imagine 19th century WhatsApp, but with mirrors. Picture a soldier saying, "Message to Fort Lockhart. All is chill." And then another guy responds with, "Cool bro." On most days, everything was relaxed, but on this day, things were going to be anything but chill. It was the 12th of September, 1897, when Saragarhi woke up to 10,000 heavily armed tribesmen rolling up like a store during Black Friday. The 21 Sikh soldiers stationed there could have just bailed, and no one would have blamed them. I mean, it's 10,000 dudes with swords and guns and probably a few grudges, but these guys, nah, we've got this. Spoiler, they didn't got this. The leader of the Sikhs, Havildar Ishar Singh, rallied his men, and by rallied, I mean he basically goes, "Gentlemen, we're about to be legends." The Sikhs lock the gates, grab their rifles and get ready to work. What followed was 7 hours of absolute carnage. These 21 guys made the Afghani tribesmen think that they were up against an entire battalion. Each soldier kept on fighting until they literally couldn't stand from the wounds they had during the battle. There's even a story about a soldier named Gurmukh Singh, who kept operating the heliograph mid-battle, signaling to Fort Lockhart, "Hey, We're kinda dying here. With his comrades fallen, Gurmukh Singh, armed with nothing but a rifle, a prayer, and pure rage, held his ground. He sent his final message to Fort Lockhart. The enemy is at the gate, requesting permission to engage. Fort Lockhart responded with 2 words: permission granted. The English in Fort Lockhart watched him fight until his last breath, taking dozens of Afghanis with him. The Afghani tribesmen literally resorted to lighting up the signal tower on fire because they gave up fighting him in hand-to-hand combat. In the end, all 21 Sikh soldiers died. But here's the kicker. They took down over 600 enemies. 600. That's a kill-to-death ratio so insane it belongs on Call of Duty. The Battle of Saragarhi became legendary. These soldiers didn't just fight, they defined bravery. Today, it's celebrated as Saragarhi Day in India. A moral of the story: sometimes being outnumbered doesn't mean you're outmatched. Also, if you're going to have a last stand against 10,000 people, at least go out as a legend. The ultimate crazy last stand was on a tiny island called Malta. This was the last stand of the Knights Hospitaller, called the Great Siege of Malta in 1565. You might be asking, so why was Malta such a big deal? Why did this teeny tiny island become the stage for one of history's greatest last stands? This is because Malta wasn't just an island, it was a strategic fortress, smack dab in the middle of the Mediterranean. It was the gateway to Christian Europe, and the Ottomans wanted that gate blown wide open. The Ottomans were led by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent. Yes, that was his actual name. Imagine putting that on a business card. The Ottomans weren't just here for sightseeing. They wanted Malta to launch further invasions into Europe, turning the Mediterranean into their personal empire-sized swimming pool. The defenders of Malta knew that this wasn't just about saving their own skins. If Malta fell, the Ottomans would march through Europe like a bulldozer through a sandcastle. Rome, Paris, Vienna, none of them were safe. This wasn't just a last stand for Malta. It was a last stand for the idea of Europe as they knew it. Jean Perizot de la Valette, the Grand Master of the Knights, understood this perfectly. This 70-year-old warhorse wasn't fighting for glory or riches. He was fighting because there was no other option. To him, surrender wasn't just unacceptable, it was unthinkable. If Malta was going down, it was going down swinging harder than a Viking at a heavy metal festival. During the Great Siege of Malta, the island became the scene of extraordinary heroism, including tales of severely wounded knights of St. John who refused to abandon their posts despite their injuries. One particularly famous account involves the knights who were so grievously wounded that they propped themselves up on chairs or leaned against walls to continue fighting. These men exemplified the knights' indomitable spirit, choosing to die on their feet, or as close to it as possible, rather than surrender. Mdina, the capital city of Malta, was a tiny fortified city with barely enough defenders to fill a decent football team. The Ottoman forces wanted to take it to have a place to rest in during the winter. But as they advanced, they were met with a surprise that can only be described as medieval trolling. The knights and Maltese bluffed and put many soldiers on the walls, with the Ottomans not being able to see that many of them were women and children in armor. The defenders were also blasting their cannons non-stop. This led to the Ottomans panicking, as they were convinced that Mdina had a lot of gunpowder. In reality, Mdina spent almost all of the little gunpowder it had bluffing, and thank God the Maltese did it because it worked. Spooked and humiliated, the Ottomans retreated and went to attack elsewhere, leaving Mdina untouched. What should have been an easy win for the Ottomans became a testament to the Knights and Maltese people's ingenuity and the sheer power of refusing to give up, even when the odds screamed for them to surrender. Despite this, the Knights were still outnumbered 5-1, their forts were still turning trouble, and their supplies were running dangerously low. Yet they still held. Why? Because losing wasn't just about dying, it was about handing the world over to an empire that would use Malta as a stepping stone to dominate everything in sight. The Ottomans attacked another fortress called St. Elmo relentlessly. Picture this: cannonballs flying, walls crumbling, and a battlefield that smelled like sweat, gunpowder, and bad decisions. Fort St. Elmo was one of the key fortresses in Malta, and it was bombed so hard it looked like Swiss cheese by the end of the siege. But what about the knights at St. Elmo? Oh yeah, they held out for 31 days, buying the rest of Malta precious time to regroup. The fortress literally broke before the knights did. When the fort finally fell, the Ottomans were so pissed off, they crucified the rest of the surviving knights. Real classy, guys. But here's the thing about the Maltese defenders. They didn't know what the meaning of give up was. Every time the Ottomans pushed forward, the knights would push back even harder. The siege dragged on for 3 grueling months, with both sides suffering massive losses. Then, as if scripted by a Hollywood blockbuster, reinforcements from Spain finally arrived, blindsiding the Ottomans completely. The once invincible Ottoman army turned around and fled in defeat. When the dust finally settled, Malta stood victorious. The Ottomans, humiliated and battered, limped back to the empire. The knights and Maltese soldier had 5,000 dead and wounded, whilst the Ottomans had a staggering 25,000 dead and 10,000 wounded. Europe, for a moment, breathed a collective sigh of relief. Malta wasn't just saved, the balance of power in the Mediterranean was preserved. And for the Knights of St. John, this was their finest hour, a moment that would cement their legend for centuries to come. If you love this video of epic last stands, hit that like button and subscribe for more history videos with a side of sarcasm. I'm Drew, thank you for watching, and see you next time.